my intuition told me not to pick up the phone. And so I did not. I did not, because I knew that he would be really hot under the collar. And normally, when he was hot under the collar, I picked up the phone and you know, I listened to it and talked about it. But this time I was guided not to. And, you know, sometimes you don't get to know why when you follow guidance. Your life just gets easier. And ultimately, I don't know why I didn't take that call that day. But as I reflect back on it, I suspect that I might have gotten fired that day. He kept calling back. He called back a couple of times more that day, and he called the next day, and I didn't return his calls. This was highly irregular. I always returned his call same day, usually almost immediately. I didn't call him back for about 5 days. And, you know, it took a lot of composure for me to do that. I mean, this is after building my faith and my trust in my intuition over a long period of time. I mean, because following intuition is a practice. You don't just start following it full out right away. It takes building the muscle of faith over time, and I built it pretty good by this time, so I really trusted. And so by the time I picked up the phone and called him, and we had a conversation, he didn't even bring it up. He was so nice and cordial, and we just talked about the things that we needed to talk about new projects and this and that, and at the end of our 20 or 30-minute call, he said, oh, and by the way, you know, I was pretty hot about what happened a few days ago, and it's probably good that we didn't talk on the phone then, and just don't let it happen again. And that was it. And so that was amazing. You know, I also had clients that sometimes I wouldn't talk to for a couple of years, 2-3 years at a time, because they were sporadic purchasers of outdoor advertising. And so they would buy a few billboards, and they would run for a few months for something they had going on, and then I wouldn't hear from them for years. And yet, sometimes I would just get a feeling, a powerful gut feeling that I needed to call one of those clients. And I would call them up, or I'd send them an email, and invariably, I would say 8-9 times out of 10, they would say, oh my God, your timing is so perfect. I need to purchase some billboards right now. And in a good chunk of percentage of that time, the amazing thing is that they would often say, and you know what, I misplaced your phone number because it's been so long since we talked, and I didn't know how to get a hold of you. So if I hadn't followed that intuition, I wouldn't have gotten that business. They wouldn't have gotten that level of customer service. In terms of, you know, managing and growing a business, there's a lot of different parts of the business that have to be attended to. And some of them you wouldn't even think about using your inner guidance, or that you would even do an analysis of. For example, one time, one of my salespeople and I went on a call to this large, well, you know, medium-sized company for the local economy, and they wanted to purchase a lot of billboards from us. You know, maybe it was a 20 billboard campaign, which was pretty sizable. They're an advertiser that we'd seen spending millions on TV for years. Seemed like it would be fantastic for us. But as we left the meeting on the way home in the car, I told my salesperson, that I did not feel that we should take the business, that intuitively I was having a very strong sense that they weren't going to pay their bills. And in our business, we were basically a broker of billboards and other outdoor advertising. So if these people wanted to buy $400,000 worth of billboards, we would actually buy those billboards from the vendors, sign for the $400,000, and then we'd have our clients sign with us. So essentially, we were on the hook for $400,000. And if we had a deal like that go bad, we could be out of business. And so it was a very rare thing that I had an intuition not to take business. It's hard to turn business down, especially big business like that appeared on its face to be quite a good company and a good set of business for us to take. But I got that, and so we actually said no to them, and they ended up buying their advertising directly with the vendors. And 6 months later, we found out from the vendors that they had defaulted on their contracts and did not pay their bills. And that would have been a very significant blow to our business. And I don't know that we would have recovered from that. And so there were actually, I would say, maybe twice a year that would happen. And that's significant because any one of those times, if we had taken on the business and the company had failed, it could have brought us down. So it's invaluable in places that we don't even think about, that we might be using our inner guidance and our intuition. When, change is always a part of business. No matter what business we're in or no matter what part of life we're in, change is always happening. And even small things, like I remember I had a laptop computer that I had, and over and over and over again, I had the intuition that I needed to get a new laptop, that it was time to ship that. And so I just couldn't do it. I was busy, and I was used to my laptop, and I didn't want to shop for a new one, and I kept putting it off, and I kept having this over and over again, this knowing that came in many forms. I would have it in the form of a picture, and I would have it in the form of a feeling, and I would even have a voice inside of my head that would say, get a new laptop. And yet I just kept ignoring it, and I had moved into a stage of my business where I wasn't traveling much. So my logic told me that I didn't need a laptop, and yet I kept getting this clear information, and I was using the laptop quite a bit, so I have a lot of information stored on it. And of course, I'm sure you can already predict what happened, which is that soon thereafter the laptop crashed, and it was quite inconvenient, and I lost a significant amount of data. And it would have been so easy for me just to follow that part that gave me that information from someplace deep in my knowingness that I can't explain or know how it got there, but I just knew. And by the way, I've seen where people who are interested in writing books about the subject of intuition in business have actually surveyed a lot of the more successful CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and successful people in the business field and the investing field, and many of them attribute a part of their success to this intuition, this intangible piece that nobody can really explain. And the laptop is obviously something quite minor, but definitely an inconvenience. When I went to actually sell my business, which was a rather significant endeavor for me, it was a major factor. My investment banker came into my office one day, and he had a list of companies that he had brought in. And we had talked about that we were going to send what they call a book, which is information about your company being for sale. Actually, we weren't going to send the book. We were going to send a letter to a number of companies that we were going to select off of a list of with criteria that I had given him. And one of the criteria for the list that he was bringing was companies that had $100 million of revenue and up that were in the media business. And so he sat down across the table from me, and he handed me this list, and at the bottom of the list were a bunch of companies with an X drawn through them. And I asked him, what are these companies with the X drawn through them? And he said, well, my assistant accidentally printed out some companies that are over $100 million in revenue. And I said, okay, so we'll ignore those. And I went through the list, and I checked off the ones that I wanted to send a letter to. And then while we were chatting, I just was glancing at the list with the X over it, just something to do with my eyes as we talked. And on it, I saw a company. And I can't tell you the name of the company because of non-disclosure, but there was a company name on there that, as best I could tell, had nothing, the name of their company had nothing to do